Alex, welcome to the show today.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome, sir. And Alex, I've been talking with you off and on. You've been calling into a lot of these different alternative radio shows, mostly who have more of like a nationalist mindset or revisionist type of commentary and what their show is based around with revisionism. What shows do you normally call into, Alex, and contribute to for the most part?
Well, mostly the shows that are quite good for Europeans to call in according to the time, because the time difference is very big. And mostly I was calling on Charles Giuliani for some maybe 4 years now. I like to call to the fourth position of Wolf Wall Street, who's got a show on Sunday. Called a few times into Renegade and few other shows, but it's basically those shows that I called in.
Okay, great. And you did a show not too long ago with Wolf Wall Street, Fourth Position Radio, regarding the Serbian floods. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, that was some few weeks ago.
Okay. Can you update us on what you know about Serbia right now with the floods and what's going on there?
Well, it's the life is back to normal, but in some places they're still rebuilding it. A lot of houses were destroyed by landslides, by high water. It's life is kind of back to normal, but we have these jackals now, these hyenas from the central banks that are coming to help us. We had Monsanto donating seeds for farmers so they can start their season again. And our friends are using this situation to get the grip on my country. So that's kind of sad. And
Serbia's got a long history of conflict, especially with the Islamic peoples around the corner, the Turks, the Albanians, some Macedonians, and Croatians also that converted as well. Is that correct?
well, those Croatians that converted are mostly Bosnian Muslims, Serbs and Croats living in Bosnia. Some percentage of those people converted to Islam a few hundred years ago, and they remain Muslims to this day. So yes, we had the conflicts, and those Macedonians that you mentioned are basically most Albanians, because in Macedonia there is like 50% of Albanians, and it's happening to them just as what was happening to Serbia in Kosovo. Serbia, let's start before we got occupied by Ottoman Turks. In 1389, Serbia had this big battle of Kosovo against the Turks. Maybe it was one Serb on 10 Turks in this battle, and we fought it very hard. Eventually we lost, and Turks suffered tremendous losses themselves. But they didn't conquer us immediately after the battle. It took them some 60 years, because Serbia basically lost all its men. So it was very, very hard to reproduce new people, while Turks just were able to bring a million of other people from everywhere in Asia, and they walked into Serbia and conquered us. Before, Serbia was a proud nation, was a big nation, part of the Byzantine Empire, and we had our own culture, tradition, and that was basically forbidden with the coming of Turks. The religion was forbidden. They were making it very hard to remain Serb and a Christian. So many people converted, but most of Serbs didn't. Maybe some 90% didn't, and we're living basically in hell for
What
these
time frame
500
are we
years.
talking about? Is this still 14th century, Alex?
Yeah, 40th century and onward
Mhm.
to the 1800s, early 1900s, when we kicked Turks out. So we were living in a struggle. We didn't want to convert. We wanted to remain what we were, and we managed that pretty well. I'm talking to Serbian liberals, and I'm telling them all the time, if our ancestors were thinking like them, we wouldn't exist these days. We would all be Turks. We would all be kind of like Albania now is, or parts of Bosnia. So we are very proud of that we kept our own culture.
1456, there was a strong resistance as well, with Serbia fighting with Macedonians at the time, fighting off the Turks. And then back in 1804 and 1815, there was another situation where the Turks pretty much took control again, right?
Yes, there were many of those kind of resistance fights and trying to free ourselves, but it was basically always crashed. We didn't have much help from the neighboring countries, and Serbs feel betrayed by the neighbors actually because of what was happening. It's a strange story. It's very complicated. I mean, Austrian-Hungarian Empire had one part of Serbia, and the other part was under the Turks. So Serbs that were living in Austrian-Hungarian Empire were basically protecting the borders from the Turks not to invade further into Europe. And they were left alone. They were able to manage culture, tradition, to remain Serbs. But for that, they had to protect the borders, which they did. And yes, we actually always hoped for help. There were always, in some period of this time, because that was 500 years long, there were kings from Austrian-Hungarian Empire and from neighboring countries that were sending some kind of help. But actually, when we needed it the most in Kosovo battle, we didn't get much help at all. There were few countries that sent help, but not like we hoped. And maybe if they did, the Turks wouldn't be able to conquer almost half of Europe.
It seems very important today for NATO, America, the Jews, to basically, I guess, ethnically cleanse a lot of the Slavic people, or if not all, even today in this period, what we're going through today. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's a strange thing. We are small people, Serbs especially, but somehow we were always bullied by these powers. I don't know why. We do not play any significant role in world politics, but many things happened in Serbia that affected Europe, like the start of the First World War. And we can go later into that too. But I don't know if Slavs were not treating Jews well. Let's be honest. I mean, we were very rough with them through our history. So it's a kind of revenge of their own. And the worst is they're using white people to accomplish the revenge.
Yeah, Tony Blair happens to be one of them. Supposedly, from what I read, he represents the Albanian government.
He gave Albanians their country. He was one of the perpetrators. He works for the Albanian government too as an advisor.
Yes, exactly.
And now he came to Serbia yesterday to help Serbia join the EU. You know, and our president, prime minister, who was a very nationalistic guy in the 90s, hardcore Serbian radical. He experienced a very big change. He became this huge liberal today. But the same guy, that Serbian prime minister, was in the 90s talking how Blair should be arrested and killed and all these politicians. But today he's accepting them as his friends. So it's very weird, and Serbs are not happy with that at all. Serbs, for majority Serbs, I think some 65-70% do not want to enter the EU. We fought for hundreds of years for our sovereign country to rule by ourselves. And now we have a country, actually, and they want to put us again in some kind of union where we will lose our sovereignty.
Yeah, I got an article here for today. The website is inserbia.info. I don't know if you ever go there. Prime Minister of Serbia, Alexander Vučić, met today in Belgrade with former Prime Minister of UK, Tony Blair. Topic of the meeting was the process of joining the European Union. Prime Minister Vučić presented economic and political reforms that Serbian government is planning to implement in the future and asked Mr. Blair to help Serbia on its path to the European Union with his connections and reputation. Former British Prime Minister expressed satisfaction over Serbia's progress and gave strong support to the European integration process and intentions of Belgrade to implement all the necessary reforms, accepting to help Serbian government in the process.
Yes, yes. And the process is they take over our banks, over our industry, over our everything, over our lives. That's the process of the democratic European Union. And Serbs see through the lies. But yeah, the problem with Serbia is we were bombed by NATO. We were called the biggest aggressors after the Second World War, genocidal maniacs. So we were bombed into oblivion, and we were basically put on our knees. So we are in a very, very, very difficult situation right now because we are surrounded by NATO countries, and many of these countries are basically our traditional enemies, and we are surrounded by EU. So if some nationalist would come on power again and try to keep Serbia being a sovereign country, they would be able to implement war in one day. They would get minorities to rise up, and the same shit would be going on again. It's very complicated.
Yeah, Serbia is surrounded by the Islamic hordes as well as the EU-NATO alliance, as well as Russia, yes. Pretty much almost.
Yes, we are surrounded by Croatia, who are sadly enough also our traditional enemies. There is not two so similar people in the world that hate each other more, like Serbs and Croats. Then we have the Bosnian Muslims in Bosnia. Then we have Albanians and Kosovo part, what used to be Serbia, predominantly by ruled by Albanians, 2 million of them. With Macedonians, we have kind of a good relationship because they are in the same troubles as Serbs were with the Albanians. With Bulgarians, we had many, many wars before, but we are not enemies anymore, but they are also in the NATO. With Romanians are also our neighbor, and Romanian people are, yeah, we never had war with them. We were always kind of fighting against the Turks together.
After World War II, when Germany and Italy took over Yugoslavia, Kosovo was assigned to Albanians for the most part, right? The Italian controlled Albania, and Germany and Bulgaria took over the rest of the Yugoslavia region. And then basically there was interethnic conflicts going on at that point too. Was that, can you describe why that took place? The interethnic conflicts right around World War II towards the end of it?
You're talking during the World War II,
yes,
right?
Yes. Towards the end, but during, yes.
Yeah, it was very complicated because Serbia actually didn't want war with Germany nor with Hitler, with Russia. Serbia wanted to be neutral, what was not possible. Germans didn't want that. They want us to join the pact, which we did in 1941. We signed a pact agreement with Germany. And then we basically had an instigated false flag from the United Kingdom to destroy that pact between Serbia and Germany, which made, and they successfully did it, which made Hitler very mad. And our traditional enemies like Albanians and Bosnian Muslims and Croatians, they joined immediately. And they basically used that to get even with Serbs and profit out of that.
And then they flooded Kosovo to, hundreds of thousands of people and forced the Serbs to leave the area and migrate elsewhere, right?
Yes, yes. Basically, during that period, after that kind of revolution, we didn't have our own country. We were split it in biggest part had the Croatia, then Albanians had a part, Italians had a part, Hungarians had a part, Bulgarians had a part. So during the Second World War, Serbia actually didn't have its own country anymore. But the reason was why Serbia wanted to be neutral was because of our long brotherhood with Russia. And Serbs are very, very emotional when it comes to Russians. They helped us many times in the war against Turks and Greeks too. So there is kind of brotherhood unity between Serbs, Greeks, and Russians. And Serbs didn't want to be sent to a Russian front, even though that Serbia, before the Second World War, the most repressive laws against communists in Europe. Serbia was during the World War the first Judenfrei country in Europe, a Jew-free country in Europe. But yes, because of our traditional partnership and brotherhood with Russians, we couldn't allow ourselves to send Serbs to fight the Russians. That would be even bigger disaster for us. Just imagine when Germans lost, what the Russians would, communist Russians would do with us if we have sent some people. So we were kind of stuck. What's very similar to this day with Ukrainian thing, because we are now stuck between the EU and the Russia. People want to have a good relationship with Russia. The politicians want to have good relationship with the EU. And both Russia and the EU is pressing us to make up our mind. And as I said, we are surrounded by NATO, so we are in a very, very screwed situation today.
And also there's the South Stream pipeline that they're talking about going through Serbia.
Yes, the South Stream pipeline is not going only through Serbia, but it goes through few EU countries like Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Austria, and now they have boycotted it. EU with the sanction, they put a stop to it. So now they are still talking about it, but they say that some contracts have to be changed, but it's all basically this geopolitical stuff going on. Yeah, but Serbia still, it's not up to us to nobody's asking us. Everybody's coming to Serbia and demanding some kind of stuff, and we are right in the between, a small nation that is actually fed up of war. So Serbia is in a very difficult situation right now.
I'm reading this article. It's on Yahoo right now. It was a recent article, and it's discussing Russia's connection with Serbia over the years, as well as the bind that Serbia is in with the EU, and it's talking about how Russia has granted loans of $1.3 billion to build construction of railways and deal with the huge budget gap. Also, there is an EU intervention of a $45 billion Russian pipeline that is to pass through Serbia.
Yeah, that's the South Stream.
Okay.
That's the one.
Okay. So that hasn't been implemented yet. I know in Bulgaria they stopped working on it just right now. They suspended the work. But it does sound like this pipeline is intended to go through Serbia at one point or another, right?
Yes, and that's basically it. The EU people the politicians come to Serbia and tell Serbs that we should watch out with taking money and Russian investments. And, they come and they tell us we should have gay parade, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this. it's not a friendly kind of meetings. It's just the demands that Serbian people do not like at all.
Who's making these demands? Russian?
No, EU.
Oh, okay.
EU politicians. Each and every year when homosexuals want to organize a gay parade, we have all these EU politicians coming to Serbia and demanding that we give these people rights and whatever. And they're basically blackmailing us, you know, because each and every time when they say you shouldn't accept Russian investments or Chinese investments or whatever, they already also threaten us to kick us out of the, they will just put you like on a side when some big things are going on, when you buy gas or when you buy whatever.
Oh, yeah.
They will just boycott you and
sanctions.
you will not be allowed.
Yeah, they'll put sanctions on you, yeah. Russia state-owned oil and gas giant Gazprom holds a majority 51% stake in the Serbian oil company NIS.
Yes.
So,
and that's also one thing, you know, that's Serbia sold that for no money to Russians, and actually for Russians to support us in our Kosovo battle. So we gave that away just for no money to Russians. But yeah, okay. And actually, we also paid the most expensive gas in the region. We pay, everyone else pays cheaper gas to the Russians. So many Serbs are complaining about that, saying, well, these are supposed to be our brothers. Why are we paying so much? Why are we paying more than everyone else?
Ukraine's going through the same thing with Russia as far as how much they pay versus the rest of Europe.
Yeah, it's a geopolitical stuff. It's and it's always fought on the small people's back. It's terrible what's going on, and yeah, as a small country, you are not able to change anything. Either are with them or you are their enemy. So we were their enemy many times. We fought each and every empire that was around us. We fought Roman Empire, we fought even Byzantine Empire, we fought Turks, we fought Germans twice, we fought NATO. I mean, who is next? Can it please end?
So let's go back to World War I. We were going to dive into like the 1913, wasn't there an independence that occurred with Serbia back then too?
Yes, actually we were freeing ourselves from the Turks, and still huge part of Serbia and Bosnia and other Slavic countries, South Slavs like Croatian and Slovenia, they were still under the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So yeah, it was, many Serbs had an idea back then to liberate Serbia once and for all from the occupators and to start our own country after 500 years once again. Okay, and rule in our own country.
1913, bam, and then World War I ensues. Let's talk about this point on, and let's get into the breakdown of Yugoslavia and the NATO bombing of Serbia and things of that nature.
Yes, in 1914, June 28, Gavrilo Princip, now it's the 100-year anniversary this year. Gavrilo Princip, Serbian student, murdered Franz Ferdinand, the king of Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And that's basically what started the First World War, but what mainstream historians don't want to mention, that it was a total false flag, and it was created by the Freemasons, basically organized from France and from England, with Serbian Freemasons.
And France has the Grand Orient Lodge, by the way.
Yes, and they're very, very French part of Freemasonry was most presented in Serbia, and they were always there. They're one of the organizers, Masonry there. So
some say the Grand Orient is more powerful than the Scottish Rite and the York Rite. Is there any truth in that?
Who would know? I wouldn't know. I think that our friends from the Middle East are most powerful. These are just the
They're little
Mario.
factions and little arms of the octopus, basically.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So
So
yeah, they
1914, World War I ensues. The Austrian-Hungarian king is assassinated.
yes, and that was a disaster for Serbia because Serbian monarchy and government didn't want that at all. We just couldn't fight against the Austrians. I mean, it's like I want to fight against 100 people and I'm all. But yeah, these people had another plans, so they organized this murder of Franz Ferdinand with the Serbian Masons of Gavrilo Princip. And it was the Black Hand organization of young Bosnia. And at that period of time, Europe were Mason organizations like Young Turks, Young Bosnia, Young Austria, Young France. And the same organization, but the Serbian part, killed the Franz Ferdinand. And then we had this a letter from Austria declaring us war. And there was no way for us getting out of it. Even the Serbian government and the king sentenced these people to death for treason, for killing the Duke. But no, there was no chance for us stopping the war. And it was tremendous war. Serbia lost 8% of its population back then. Some say it's 25, some say it's 45, but I keep it somewhere in the middle, 38, but it's over 30%. So that war was not good for us at all. We were screwed into the war that we were not able to fight, and we suffered tremendous consequences. And yeah, everything else is the history. It's,
Following World War I, what took place at that point? Let's transition into in between World War I and World War II.
became a bit was we created Yugoslavia. Even many Serbs and Croats and Slovenians didn't want it, but the king wanted it, and it's basically creation from the Western powers. But between the two wars, actually, Yugoslavia was a wealthy country and had a very good economy and very good standard of life between these two wars. So that was actually a kind of good period for Serbs until the Second World War.
Now, World War II, right afterwards, how did Yugoslavia become a communist government?
Well, it's basically like I have to start then with the Second World War, with the start of it. We had this monarchy, and when Serbia was attacked by Germans, the king was 16 years old and he fled to England. He left the country behind, so Yugoslavia was in a state of anarchy. And all these kind of little groups emerged, nationalist Chetniks. There were two fractions of Chetniks. One part of Chetniks were from Nedic and from Ljotic. They were collaborating with Germans. Other Chetniks were from Draža Mihailović. They were collaborating with English and Americans. And we had communist rebels. So there were kind of three fractions in Serbia, all fighting each other. We call the Second World War a brotherly war because we were never divided on an ideology before. We always used to fight wars all as one, but this time we had all these little fractions and everyone was fighting each other. So people knew, and everyone knew, that English and French and the Allies and Americans will actually not support Serbian Chetniks, and they just let them loose, and communists took over, Tito. And yeah, he was working closely with Russians, but after Second World War, Russians wanted to march into Yugoslavia and make it basically a Warsaw Pact, what Tito refused, and there was almost a war between Yugoslavia and Russia after the Second World War. But thanks God it didn't happen, but they managed to create peace, and Yugoslavia became a communist country. And yeah, in the next 50 years, the communists screwed us more than the Turks were able in 500 years. So communism, some Serbs like to say it's bigger disaster than Turks. I mean, I wouldn't agree, but it was terrible. They basically replaced the whole elite, the free thinkers and everyone, and installed the new communist ones, and people that were freedom loving and knowing what's going on, they were arrested and prosecuted and killed.
How did Bolshevik Russia back in 1913 affect Serbia, if not at all? I'm just curious.
Not at all, because Serbia at that time was a monarchy and was doing everything to prosecute communists. As I mentioned before, we had the most strict laws against communism in Europe. And that could be maybe because we had these close ties to Russia, and we were warned by other Russians not to let that happen. And yeah, later on, the communists were able to use that Slavic brotherhood of Serbs and Russians to install communism, what was terrible.
So in 1974 is the end of communist Yugoslavia? Does that sound about right?
Well, actually not. It was as long as Tito was alive, and Tito died in 1980.
Okay.
He ruled it basically with an iron fist, and nationalism was forbidden. Many people didn't know in Yugoslavia what they are. When troubles came, people start finding out that they are Serbs, Croats, Slovenians, and all these other people, because before that, during communism, we were all Yugoslavs. And Yugoslavia means South Slavia, South Slavs. And you were not allowed to talk about nationalism and all this stuff. So when Tito died, everything was loosened up, and nationalists from all sides had the ground to stand up and say, hey, listen, this communism has to go. We have to get our home countries back. And yeah, it came to another war.
Well, actually, in 1986, the Serbian Orthodox Church published an official claim that Kosovo Serbs were being subjected to an Albanian program of genocide. But supposedly, it's been debunked that that never occurred.
Yes, I know what you're saying, and that's true. But that was going on since the communist takeover of Yugoslavia, because Tito, we had this kind of brotherhood and unity politics in Yugoslavia, very similar what you have in the United States today and in EU. Like, we are all the same, multicultural country, hate crimes, you're not allowed to offend anyone. And communist Tito had a good relationship with the Albanian dictator Enver Hoxha. And yeah, Albanians were crossing the border just like it's happening to the United States and the Western Europe today from Arabs and everyone else actually. And you were not allowed to say anything, and Serbs were just seeing that they are becoming a minority, and everyone who stood up to say something against it was arrested and was prosecuted. So actually, I'm always telling, if people want to see what's the future of the EU, they should study Yugoslavia, because Yugoslavia was some kind of the EU, but smaller, where they took many nations and blend them into one and tried to create something new, what eventually resulted to the terrible war that happened after that. And yes, the problem in Kosovo was in 1912, there were 5% Albanians. And in 2012, there is 2 million Albanians, and or 95% 5% Albanians and 5% Serbs. So it just switched. They were crossing the borders. They were Muslims. They were all having 8 kids, 9 kids, 10 kids, while Serbs were having 1 or 2. So we were kind of demographically destroyed.
It's exactly what's happening to Americans here today, the white Americans, exactly.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. In Europe, exactly the same goes on. I'm telling everyone, if you want to see what the plans are for Europe and for all white countries, study Yugoslavia, study Kosovo. You will see it happening. I mean, we in Yugoslavia also had affirmative action, things that are implementing in the EU and in America right now. The goal and the plan is the same. It's the same. It's terrible. If we all don't do something very fast, it can be that in 100 years we will disappear from the face of the earth. Some Serbs were also laughing when other Serbs were warning about that in Kosovo. But today it happened, and you need 100 years for it. And, it's a demographic war waged on us, on all of us.
It can happen within 2 or 3 generations where a whole frickin' country is overrun by people that doesn't belong there, that aren't from there. Here's a quote from Wesley Clark. Let's not forget what the origin of the problem is. There is no place in modern Europe for ethnically pure states. That's a 19th century idea, and we are trying to transition into the 21st century, and we are going to do it with multi-ethnic states.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, you know, and the strange thing in the 90s, during the bombings and before the bombings, I was a kid and I could hear grown-ups talk. And there were many theories. There were theories that Vatican is doing it, that Masons are doing it, that Jews are doing it. There were people shouting, like, come on, people, look who is doing this. Madeleine Albright, Richard Holbrooke, Wesley Clark, the Cohen guy, Zimmerman.
Peter Sutherland. Here's Peter Sutherland, EU Commissioner and head of the World Trade Organization. We still nurse a sense of our homogeneity and difference from others, and that's precisely what the European Union, in my view, should be doing its best to undermine.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's a war on European culture and tradition, and it's terrible. It's there. I mean, Wesley Clark was bragging about how they tested the newest weapons in Serbia, and it went successfully. I mean, they called the operation of bombing of Serbia "Merciful Angel." I mean, look how far it goes, and it's terrible. They bombed us into a stone age.
Let's get into that. Let's talk about the War of Kosovo.
Yes, it basically started when war started in Croatia and Bosnia. The Albanians were always wanting to gain the Republic of Kosovo for themselves. And the problem was Yugoslavia was never able to research how many Albanians are living there because they're crossing the borders. Most of them were not registered. So Milosevic government in the 90s wanted to register all people living in Kosovo to see how many Albanians are living there, to see how many Serbs are living there, and some other people also living there. But Albanians were always rebelling against that because most of these people were illegals. And if Serbia could register who is not illegal and who is illegal, we would be able to kick the illegals out. But that's what they were preventing, and they were always rebelling against it. And yeah, the war started, and at the end of the war, there is 2 million of Albanians. Well, there were some 500,000 registered before the war. So that's how it basically started. And they had NATO on their side playing the victim. And Serbs were already these bad guys from Bosnia and Croatia war. So it was basically very easy to find an aggressor and to point the finger at the evil Serbs.
It seems like the propaganda, the anti-white propaganda was in full force during the takeover or the infiltration of the Serbian lands, and the propaganda was being published mainstream all over American media as far as those poor Albanians, you know?
Yes, just like they do today in the United States. I mean, these poor Mexicans, you know.
Yes,
It's exactly the same. And whoever stands up in the United States and says, "Hey, listen, man, I'm losing my country. I'm losing my people."
you're a
He's
racist.
imme- yeah, he's a racist. He's fascist. He's Nazi. He's everything. Just name it.
You're a right-wing
Xenophobe. Oh,
extremist who wants to kill 6 million Jews.
yeah. Even left-wing extremists. They will use everything. Whoever thinks with his own head and sees what's going on, they will use it. But mostly what they used was this Nazi rhetoric. Serbs were worst genocidal maniacs after the Second World War. The same kind of propaganda going on against Serbs after the war is going on against the Germans after the war. It's very, very similar tactic, like they're using it for hundreds of years.
Alex, you suggested that I watch the Brooklyn Connection. And by the way, I forgot to plug your TrueTube account, and that is Serbian Resistance at TrueTube. That's the username. And you uploaded this documentary called The Brooklyn Connection. I watched that, and it really fucking pissed me off, by the way. The KLA, can you get into the KLA?
Yeah, KLA UČK is how they call them. They're Kosovo Liberation Army. And they were basically, you can compare them to all these so-called freedom fighters in the Middle East. And there were also Mujahedeens and Al-Qaeda members on their side. They were armed by NATO to fight Serbian government. And yeah, in that documentary, you can see very well, it's a Dutch documentary, you can see very well how they were arming Albanians from Albanian lobbyists in America. You can see Albanian terrorists who are basically heroin dealers and organ traffickers meeting with John Kerry, meeting with Wesley Clark, with Richard Holbrooke in the United States, donating money for Kerry election, John Kerry's election that year or whatever. But yeah, they were in that documentary. You can see very, very well how they used to traffic weapons from America and from various other places
You know,
into Kosovo.
they set up the Albanian, the KLA set up a hunting club in Albania, and that gave them the loophole to have a regular old gun dealer allow them to sell them high-powered rifles, assault rifles, even like it looked like a helicopter gun. um, but this process was not stifled at all. It wasn't stopped. They were given not immunity, but because all their paperwork was all done correctly, they were allowed to ship high artillery, ammunition, and weaponry from gun shops of America onto commercial airlines to Albania.
Yeah, and the what they said when they were asked, "What are you doing?" They said, we meet in Albania, we go to hunt elephants in Africa."
Yeah. Well, later
Yeah.
on, not too long after, when he's showing that process of being in that gun shop, he also stated that that oh man, I forgot my train of thought. But go ahead. You can talk a little bit, and it'll come back to me. I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah, they were basically arming them, and these people, these same people that you see in that documentary that were meeting with Wesley Clark, Holbrooke, and Kerry, and everyone in that documentary. These are the people that are accused of organ trafficking in Kosovo during the war, and there is many proofs that they were arresting Serbian civilians and harvesting the organs.
It's
And
fucking disgusting. It sounds like China today.
yeah, many Serbs in Serbia today who are researching it are saying all roads lead to Israel. They're basically saying if you want to research what was going on, you have to start in Kosovo and it will lead you to Israel. And that's the reason why nobody talks about it. There were some efforts to charge these people, but it was just shut down.
Three of the
Nothing else.
top KLA were indicted, and one was sentenced, and then the two were acquitted, and then the other one was eventually acquitted as well.
Yeah, and these people are today, one is the premier of Kosovo, the prime minister of Kosovo. They're all into politics. They're all in power in Kosovo now. They are now elite politicians, and they go around Europe and they meet with high officials, with these hypocrites who are so-called for human rights. And yeah, it's terrible.
I remember what I was going to say. In that documentary, I forgot this Albanian's name, but he said, oh yeah, these gun shop owners in America, we even stated, oh, we're fighting communism, and they were supportive of us, these American gun shop owners. The most of them are right-wing extremists is what this Albanian said, and they supported our rise, and because I stated that we were fighting communism and we had support with that, as well as even getting prices, lowered because of that reason.
Exactly. And actually communists gave them Kosovo.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just spin, to get people on their side. And
exactly.
it was terrible. Kosovo is for Serbia an eternal war, and it didn't end with this last war. I can say confidently that each and every Serbian, even liberal Serbs, teach their kids that Kosovo is still Serbia and setting some ground for a future war. Each and every Serbian in his mind has this idea that once we will take Kosovo back. If it lasts 500 years.
Starting to lose you again there, buddy.
Well, it can last. Is it better now?
Yeah, go ahead. Just started happening again, but go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
But it's basically that Serbs will never give up Kosovo, and as I said, we lost Serbia for 500 years, and we won it back, and that's the same mindset among Serbian people these days. Serbs say even if it takes another 500 years, we'll never forget them. We will win it back because Kosovo has some special place in Serbian heart. The Serbian Republic was grounded there, and Serbia is Orthodox Christian country, regardless of what we think of Christians and what we know about Christianity. My people feel they're Christians, and there are churches. There is 1,300 churches in Kosovo that are old from 1,000 years ago, and they're in hands of Albanian Muslims. They burned the churches. They do all this kind of stuff what hurts Serbian people very much. I mean, even if I went through Charles Giuliani, I know what Christianity is, but it offends me too. It's our history somebody's peeing on and disrespecting, and it's terrible. And yeah, as I said, Kosovo is the eternal war of Serbia, and this war, this is not done. This is not done at all. Many nationalist Serbs actually hope for jihad. When you talk to nationalist Serbs and when you mention jihad to them, they're like, yeah, bring it on. We can't wait for it. So we will be able to cleanse our countries of the fucking Turks. I'm sorry for my language.
No, go ahead, man.
But that's how most of the Serbs think, even to this day.
Let out your feelings, man. Fuck these people. Hey, Alex, we're going to take a 4-minute break. We're going to play a Serbian song. What's the name of it again?
Are you playing the second one?
Yeah, the one that we were able to get to work.
It's Lazi, Lazo, Lazare. It's old Serbian song, few hundred years old, that predates the Byzantine Empire and our king that lost his life in Kosovo battle, Lazar. So it's called Lazi, Lazo, Lazare. Lazar is a name.
Excellent. So Del, let's fire that up. We'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you for listening to Circus Maximus. We'll be right back.
Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazare. Te dolazi do mene, te dolazi do mene, te dolazi do mene, do mene. Prihvati se za mene, prihvati se za mene, prihvati se za mene, za mene. Zasmilene marame, zasmilene marame, zasmilene marame, marame. Zazlačane rukave, zazlačane rukave, zazlačane rukave, rukave. Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazare. Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazare. Te dolazi do mene, te dolazi do mene, te dolazi do mene, do mene. Prihvati se za mene, prihvati se za mene, prihvati se za mene, za mene. Zasmilene marame, zasmilene marame, zasmilene marame, marame. Zazlačane rukave, zazlačane rukave, zazlačane rukave, rukave. Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazi, Lazo, Lazare, Lazare.
Welcome back to Circus Maximus, everyone. We got Alex from Serbia. So
Great.
Alex, we were touching on some of the atrocities, a lot of the atrocities that were going on with Serbs. And you also sent me another video called The Weight of Chains. Can you talk about that film, please?
Yes, Weight of Chains discusses aftermath of the war in Yugoslavia, in all of Yugoslavia, ex-republics. And it's basically this anti-globalist, leftist documentary created by these kind of people, just blame the Nazi and whatever. But if you are able to watch that documentary and go through these connotations of these leftists, you will see very, very good informations about what really happened and how they stole the industry of Yugoslavia. For example, Yugoslavia was the biggest meat exporter to the United States in Europe. That was totally crushed down. That was done. Now it's bought by the foreign firms, by multinationals. They bombed the tobacco industry. They bombed the tobacco factory, which was later bought by Philip Morris for no money. They bombed the car industry, what was bought by Fiat, and many, many other things. It was just a ripoff. Because Yugoslavia in communist period, however it was the best communist country that ever existed. I'm not saying the communists were good or whatever, but comparing Yugoslavia to other communist countries, it was much better way of living because we had the kind of system. We were good with the East and the West. We were not closed down with the Iron Curtain like the other communist countries. So Yugoslavia was very, very powerful country with good economics and everything. And basically after the war, it was all destroyed and bought by the multinationals from the West, and we know who is behind them. And even Madeleine Albright was buying a telecommunications firm in Kosovo. Wesley Clark was buying some mining fields in Kosovo because Kosovo is very rich in these resources, in nickel, in metals, in everything. So it was basically a ripoff, It was that's how they created this word Balkanization. And first off, I hate the word Balkan because it was given to us by the Turks. Second, this word Balkanization means destroying Serbia, giving Serbian country to the minorities wherever the minorities existed. They use this word Balkanization throughout the world, Balkanization of Russia, Balkanization of America, Balkanization of here, of there, of everywhere, kind of preparing people for some kind of chaos where they will give minorities the power and indigenous people will become minorities in their own country. And that's basically what happened in Yugoslavia and especially in Serbia. I think Yugoslavia was kind of experiment for the future happenings in Europe. Basically blending these people together, letting them live in one country, basically a demographic war. And it's very intelligent one, because they look at the longer terms where they will become a majority. I can remember in Yugoslavia back then that these Muslims, when you get into an argument with them, they were grabbing their penis and they were telling us how this is how we're going to win the war. And terrible, I lived in Netherlands for 20 years and I had the same experience with the Muslims in Netherlands, in Holland.
It sounds like the old my dick phrase over in America, huh?
Yeah, and basically grabbing their dick and saying, like, this is how we're going to win the war, And it's basically how they do it. It's very, very intelligent, evil kind of plan. We have to start making kids. But yeah, our people are brainwashed into women want to have career. And our women, they turned our women against us. And that's, in my eyes, one of our biggest problems. It's terrible, and even to this day, Turkish Premier Erdogan comes to Germany and other European countries, and he tells his people never to assimilate, always to stay Turkish and to be patriotic Turks. And yeah, whoever is complaining about that is immediately a racist. I mean, just imagine if Serbian president would go to Turkey or some other European one and say to its own people, like, you should do just as the same. It's terrible. It's not allowed to. I mean, how many mosques are being built in Europe and how many churches are built in Turkey? If you want to gain Turkish citizenship, you have to change the name. Just imagine if some Dutch president says, from now on, if Turk want to have a Dutch citizenship, he has to get a Dutch name. He would be crucified. He would be totally destroyed. We are prisoners in our own countries. Our own countries became our jail. They might as well bring one huge plague in the future. Who knows? I mean, everything is possible. All the cards are on the table.
Who was it, Prince Philip, that said that he wanted to become some kind of organism, virus, to wipe out most of mankind?
Yeah, Prince Philip, yes.
So, Alex, you travel all over Europe, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Now, you get to see different parts of Europe. Can you tell us what you see when you go to different parts of Europe, and what parts of Europe do you go to, just to give us an idea of what you're looking at and the conditions of Europe today?
Where basically I'm mostly going because of my job to Western Europe and also Poland, Czech Republic, France, Swiss, Spain, Denmark, Sweden, Netherlands, Germany, Austria. Every now and then I go for assignments that we have there, and I get to talk to a lot of Europeans, and I can say I'm happily surprised to see an awakening amongst Europeans. It's a slow one, but there is one. And I was very surprised of France, actually. I mentioned that on some other shows before. In France, there is a point of no keeping a mouth shut, like in other countries. In some countries, when you start talking about these things we talk about, people just back down and don't want to talk about it. But in France, they accept you with open arms when you start talking about, it's a positive thing. I'm saying these elections, what were happening last in the EU, I do not trust politicians. I said that many times before. I've been so screwed so many times before by them. But it brings some kind of other story, and it will make people think, I hope, for our future win. And it's going on everywhere in Europe, in some countries more, in some countries less. In Netherlands, it's going on less than in France, but there are people starting to think. And I said I lived in Netherlands for 20 years. I love Dutch people, I spent my youth there. And it's just terrible what is happening to them. They are living their own Kosovo right now. And I've been trying to tell them that for a long, long time. And they're starting to see it. Netherlands is basically a small country, 17 million people. And they're being flooded like nobody else. It's terrible. And but yeah, Europe is beautiful. If you travel through Europe, you will see all these cultural, historical places, and who likes that, he will pretty much enjoy it. I love it. I like European cultures. I like European folklore, music. Yeah, I'm kind of traditional kind of guy, not religious myself, but I love the history of my people and history of Europeans, and I would like very much to preserve that.
Absolutely, me too. And Alex, about how old are you?
I'm 35.
Okay, so you're pretty close to me. I'm 39, so cool. And you were in America for a while.
Yeah, I was in where you're from.
Yeah, I'm in the same area that you were actually residing in. What was that like, being in America?
Well, it was a cultural shock, actually, Americans are very different than Europeans, and I liked it. I'm honest. I have a family there, I made great friends there. But people are different. The Europeans are somehow more with the feet on the ground. I don't mean it bad, but Americans are somehow more exaggerating and living in an American dream, you know. So, like Carlin says, you have to be asleep to live in it, you know. It's,
Yeah, exactly.
I had a great time there. I was young. I had very much fun, very, very much fun. But I never wanted to stay there. It's very different to what we are used in Europe. Chicago, basically.
And there's a large Serbian population out here in Chicago. You said it's what, the second largest in the world?
Yes, after Belgrade, Serbian capital, the biggest Serbian city is Chicago. There is 600,000 Serbs in Chicago.
Well, I only know one of them.
Well, believe me, you might be lucky.
She's good people, though.
When I talk to common people, you know, they're much easier to accept these kind of talks. What they were not used to accept these kind of talks before. There is some kind of awakening, and people are talking about it more and more each day. I myself, I'm nationalist since I'm born. Actually, my family was always nationalistic, and that's how I was raised. So somehow I always was surrounded by nationalists wherever in Europe I was. I was looking for those kind of people somehow, you know, and because the stories they have are similar to mine. But the common people, yeah, they're also somehow starting to come by slowly, but it's happening. You know, it's they see what's going on around them. They're not blind. The first thing a Dutch kid, his first connection with a foreigner is he's getting beat up, you know. And it's about time that they stand up and say no, not only in Holland, but in all these countries. You know, that's in Serbia, that's impossible. In Eastern Europe, that's impossible. You will never see a foreigner beating up Polish people in Poland, because the Polish people would stand up the next day and they will burn the whole city with them, you know. Western people are somehow pussified, what's very terrible. Their culture is taken out of them. Their tradition is taken out of them. Their pride is taken out of them. They're converted in these race-mixing multiculturalists, Marxists.
Well, some say
And
that the Nordic people, the Vikings of old, those people, the Scandinavian region has become so pacified compared to almost any other European people. Do you see that being true? Like Sweden, Norway?
Yeah, I was in Sweden. I was in Malmö last year, and I've seen it. It's basically like in Netherlands, but only Swedish people are more soft than Dutch people. You know, Dutch people are very open people, very, very communicating people, but they're a little bit more rough than the Swedes. Swedes, yeah, it's terrible what's happening to them. They should grow more balls and protecting their women, you know, and their kids. That's when I'm talking, for example, with the Slavs, with the Ukrainians, Polish, Russians. And that's why I'm getting mad, because these countries, the biggest prostitutes and the women that are being trafficked are from Poland, from Russia, from Ukraine. And in Serbia, it's a little bit different. You know, we have this competition. A father would never allow his daughter to be a prostitute. You know, he would defend her with her life. Somehow we have a little bit this pride that doesn't allow that. So our women are not these popular prostitutes all around the world. And that's what I'm telling to these Slavic people, you know, like grow your balls and protect your women. It's your mothers, your sisters, your daughters. You know, it's terrible. I get very mad when I see all this kind of stuff.
Lots of Ukrainian women are captured and used in prostitution and brothels and whatnot.
Yeah, from what I read, I don't know if it's true, but it probably is. In Ukraine, there is 6 women on 1 man.
Sounds like a good place for a man to want to live.
I'm just waiting when they're going to start flooding Ukraine with Arabs, you know.
Oh, yeah. So why do you think that of all the countries in Europe, the Poles are the ones that are immigrating all over the place more so than any other European country?
Well, because the Poland is the biggest country of these new European Union countries. They have the most people. There's
Okay.
also Bulgarians, there is Romanians, there's Czechs, there's Hungarians. Yeah, and me as one immigrant myself in the Western Europe, I, I get mad about it because the best people leave their countries, hard workers, educated people. European Union is basically an enemy to European people. I don't want to see Europe being flooded by Serbs, by anyone else. It's terrible. Look what European Union does. You join the European Union, and they basically, multinational companies use your for cheap labor. Yeah, they open up factories in these countries, and they pay people 200-300 euros a month. The same factory in the West pays the people 2,000 euros in the month. So what happens? These people are allowed to go to the West because of the EU and work in the EU for much less money what a German would do or a Dutch guy would do. So a Dutch guy or German one has to compete with the Bulgarian or with the Polish, Romanian guy. Has to lower his wage so he can keep his job. This German or Dutch guy has a loan by the bank for 300,000 euros, paying his car, paying his house. So he has to work for less money to keep his family up. So this European Union is using people on all sides. And what they create is hatred between the people. Because educated European will say, look at this Polish guy, he's taking my job.
Yeah.
Not knowing what is going on in Poland and who is behind it. Yes, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to say blacks and Arabs shouldn't come into Europe. But Eastern Europeans should come to the West, not at all. I'm Serbian nationalist, even though I live in Western Europe with plans to go back to my country because I'm fed up of being foreigner. Even if I'm treated very well, I'm not complaining about that, but I want to live in my country. And each and every nationalist man of Poland, Romania, he will not leave his country and he's against his people leaving. These brainwashed people, and not only brainwashed people, the poor people, they think they will go to the West and everything will be fine. Yes, it may be fine for some short period of time, but it's creating a huge problem for the future in our countries. We have 50 million Muslims in Europe, estimated till 90 million non-whites living in Europe. We have 150 million displaced people, European people, displaced from their countries, living in another European countries. And we Europeans have a bloody history. We know all about what war is, about borders, about everything. Serbs in Chicago came mostly in the early 1900s. Oh. And the biggest part came after the Second World War. That were Chetniks prosecuted by communists. So these people were not allowed to go back to Serbia till the 1990s when Yugoslavia collapsed. So most of them were never again in Serbia. But yeah,
going back to Serbia in the 90s wasn't really such a good idea either, was it?
No, not at all. But many of these American Serbs were actually going back volunteering to fight because communism was done and we had our traditional wars yet again, so they just couldn't wait,
Yeah, there you go.
we know all about war. It's terrible to say so, but it's in our genes.
We should
Yeah, terrible.
let's touch on some positive. Nikola Tesla, a well-known Serbian. Can you give us some information maybe most of the alternative world has not heard about Nikola Tesla?
Okay,
Some
yeah,
tidbits, maybe things.
yeah. I can give you one information that not many people know about, you know.
Okay.
When he died, his wish was to be buried according to Serbian burial traditions. And he was buried. And a few years later, so-called family of Tesla, what was not true, demanded to dig him up and to to burn him. How you call? Yeah, yeah. That was basically a terrible story, you know, to dig up a dead guy and burn him, you know, and turn him to ashes. And that's people say that's another type of conspiracy against Tesla because he was systematically taken out of our school books. We in Yugoslavia were lucky that he was from our region, so we were thought about him from our early age. But I was terribly shocked in the Western Europe that people never heard of this guy, you know, and he was systematically taken out of the books and forbidden, actually. Nobody should know that there is better way of living and having better resources for all of us. So he was totally destroyed. Some Serbs say we are very proud that Nikola Tesla, he was a Serb, but that we are Serbs like him, you know, but we should be proud that humanity got a man like that, you know. So these kind of people are born once in 1,000 years.
That's true. So
and, you know, that's my point about Putin, you know, and Russia. There is a lot of debate going on. Is he on our side or isn't he on our side? And honest to that, you know, I have one question. He did many good stuff for Russians, great stuff for Russians, really, really well stuff for Russians. But just imagine somebody comes to him and tells him, hey, listen, we have this free energy machine. It will create free energy for all of humanity. What do you think Putin would do? Would he say, oh, wow, great, let's do it? Or would he just kill him and nobody will ever hear of this guy again? You know, it's all about money and power. So people like Tesla don't get good chance.
yeah, most of the finest artists of all time, musicians, artists, inventors, a lot of times they don't even become famous until after they're dead. You know.
Yeah.
And
That's it.
their work, their lifetime work, they're broke most of the time, and then their inventions cause other people to become multimillionaires or billionaires.
Yes, and Tesla was not after money at all, because Westinghouse owned him $10 million back in the 1800s for his patent of creating electricity.
Mm-hmm.
And Westinghouse was almost broke and came to Tesla and said, listen, Tesla, we signed this huge contract and I have to pay you so much money. And if I do that, I will be broke. My firm will bankrupt. And Tesla just basically took the contract and he shredded into pieces and said, you don't owe me anything anymore. So that guy was not after money. He was after his ideals and his patents. But yeah, he was screwed by J.P. Morgan and various other people, you know. It's a very good thing that Tesla gets known, you know, to let people know that there is something else than oil and gas, you know, or maybe for our future. But who knows? Just imagine if what Tesla was saying 100 years ago. He said 100 years ago, I have one book where there his quotes, pieces out of the newspapers were from this time. And he said, in 100 years, you will honor me when the air gets polluted and when the resources, when there's short amount of resources left, you will honor me. And that's what's happening now, basically, even longer than 100 years. They stole all his patents. Marconi stole his telecommunication patent. And in 1948, the court in the United States has given the patent back to Tesla again, that actually telecommunications were not from Marconi, but from Tesla. And they restored that. But still to this day, you will hear at schools kids being taught that Marconi found out the telecommunications. Also Röntgen, Röntgen, it's when they make these pictures through your body to check your bones. What's it called in English?
X-ray?
X-ray, yeah. X-ray, telecommunications, all of these stuff actually come from Tesla. And that were all his patents. He had thousands of his patents, which were basically stolen. And most of them were stolen by the government. And who knows what kind of weapons and what they know today, you know, when there was a guy 100 years ago talking about all this stuff.
And then, Alex, with the Ukraine and Russia conflict, do you see a lot of similarities with Serbia and the EU and Russia and Ukraine kind of going on right now? A lot of similarities?
Yeah, similarities that yet again big powers fight over the small people's back, over small countries' back. But I actually see more similarities with the Second World War, with the Germans, because what we all know, before the Second World War, Germans were prosecuted in the neighboring countries, especially Poland.
Mm-hmm.
Where the people were the politicians and the elites, and we all know who they are, were basically getting people against each other, and they were murdering Germans living in Poland at that time and kicking them out. So yeah, Germans, of course, couldn't accept it anymore, and they invaded, just similar as what is happening to Russians now in Ukraine. What there is, I don't know if you heard, there's many Russians living in Moldavia, in Lithuania, Latvia, Estland, and all these Baltic countries. And there is a lot of tensions now because these countries are part of the NATO, and there is a big Russian population living there. So there is also a potential threat of happening the same as Ukraine, you know, and there's possibility that Russians will start invading all these countries. And they will claim how they want to restore the old Soviet Union, but it's basically provocations, you know. They're just playing games, and this can result to a very big problem. It's the old type of plans that worked in the past, and they are using it to this day.
What do you see as far as the end game? What is the master plan on this grand chessboard?
Eliminating most of us on this earth, going on with their technology that's far ahead of our capability of reasoning, having some this conspiracy story, but it's very logic, you know. They don't need us anymore, and yeah, you know, create a huge war, hunger, problems, and then later people will accept everything for peace and a little bit of food, and then we will have chips. We will be controlled through technology, the ones that remain. And yeah, that's the new world order. It's not a joke. It's it's not just a conspiracy theory. Just like my friend Bob, Serbia was always a farmer country, and today we import beans from China, meat from Argentina, while we were the biggest meat exporters in Europe, Serbs were the biggest pig farmers in Europe before the First World War. And now we all import this food from everywhere, you know, and it's same in Europe. But there is some places, you know, where people like local, and there is this kind of thing, buy local, and some supermarkets are selling local food from the local farmers. That's kind of good for the future, but, you know, we first have to take over our countries and be capable to decide our own future, and then we can change things. Until we take the high power, we can forget about it. It's impossible, you know. There are people with right ideas, but they don't understand. We in Serbia like to say, you clean the fish from the head. When you clean the fish,
Mm-hmm.
you clean it from the head. You start from the head and then go down. So in order to cleanse our world of evil and everyone who is doing this to us, we have to start from the head. And we all know who is on the top of the pyramid. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I like to use this analogy. Well, we know that there's that elephant in the room, right? Well, how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a
yeah,
time. One piece at a time.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you can't eat that whole elephant at once, and it seems monstrous by looking at it, but just take one piece at a time and we'll get there.
Yeah, and you start from the head so he can die.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you eat him dead, you know, not start from the tail so he'll be alive while you're eating him, you know.
Well, some say that first the immigration problem would need to be solved in white countries, then the Jewish problem. What do you think? Should it be the other way around? Go after the Jew, which is the head, or do you go after the country aspect and the nationalist aspect and remove the immigrants, the people that don't belong in your country?
Well, I think if we take power over our own countries, you know, cleanse the minority that is on the top
Mm-hmm.
and majority of our own traitors, because these are in my country, it's those kind of people, traitors working for the outside force, and we have a honest government. All this migrant problem, all this problem could be solved very, very easy even without war, you know. If you have an honest government that has a righteous plan, it can make everything happen. But as long as we have these greedy people, traitors, you know, if there weren't traitors in my country, the Jews wouldn't rule my country. You know what I mean? Just imagine Greece, Golden Dawn,
Mm-hmm.
gets into power right
Mm-hmm.
now,
Okay.
and they start doing very good things. They would be bombed the hell out of by NATO, by United States, each and every country in Europe that tries to free itself from this. Look at what happened to Germany. Who bombed them? Americans. I always say America is the biggest weapon in Jewish arsenal. Sorry to say this. I'm really sorry to say this. And this is not against you guys,
We know.
against American people.
We know.
But in order for Europe to survive, America's got to go. I'm sorry to say this, but it's like that. Everything comes from your country. So you either take your country back or you all return to Europe. I don't know what to say.
We got Bryzer coming in from Ireland. He's about to connect
nice.
and join the call.
Great.
He's got some questions for you.
Yeah, Irish people, Serbian people like Irish people. We have similar history and we like each other.
Bryzer, welcome to the show.
Good evening, guys. How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah, interesting show, Alex. Just to give us a good rundown of what was going on over in your part of the world there. And can I ask you about Milosevic and Karadzic and these guys, because, you know, the media over here have been portraying these guys as evil, nasty demons, you know. What is the impression in Serbia of these guys?
Yes, it's a great question. Look, most nationalist Serbs view these people as heroes. They stood up to NATO. They stood up for Serbia. They fought, they were prosecuted. Some of them are still in Den Haag court tribunal. Some of them are dead. But these guys, for Milosevic, for example, he's an old communist. He was a banker, and he was in power, and he somehow, the whole world turned on him, so he forcefully turned nationalist. But he was stealing from the people. Like, for example, Mladic, Ratko Mladic, the general accused for genocide in Srebrenica, 7,000 Muslims.
Yeah.
He was a real Serbian patriot general, and that Srebrenica story we don't buy. There is very well written book by a Belgian guy about the alleged genocide. But Ratko Mladic was a warrior. He was a general. He didn't like Milosevic. He didn't like Karadzic because they were politicians. And there are telephone calls that were recorded from the talks where Ratko Mladic was in the fight with Milosevic and Karadzic. He didn't want to listen to them because he didn't care what they agreed with the NATO or whatever. But Karadzic was a politician, you know. I can remember a story when Serbia was losing some places in Bosnia. Muslims were conquering it. And Karadzic was in Belgrade in a casino, you know, playing with the money of the banks of these people there, you know. There's many of these kind of stories, you know. So people will just shut their eyes and say, no, these people were true heroes. But I'm an honest guy, you know. I'm after the truth, you know. I wanna pick the bad ones out of the good ones, you know. So I'm not this guy that will close eyes and just say because they're Serbs that they are the right guys, you know. No, I will condemn my people if they were evil or whatever, you know. Because it's better for the betterment of my people. But a lot of the things what you hear in the media about these guys, it's fake. It's just these cliche stories giving labels, and you probably heard it. They compare it to the Second World War all the time and to the Holocaust. So you see basically where it's coming from.
Yeah. And what do you think happened in Srebrenica? Or did anything happen? Or was it just a big psyop? You know,
Look, Srebrenica was Serbia at that time had 75% of Bosnia. And Srebrenica is this small place near Serbian border where that was the only passage for Muslims to pass from one side to the other side. So Serbs always left that for them. That was kind of deal during the war. Mm-hmm. And Muslims were ruling that part of Bosnia, Srebrenica and Bratunac next to it. And in Bratunac, there were predominantly Serbs. And a Muslim general, Nasser Oric, he was released from the Den Haag tribunal. They said he's not guilty. He murdered in about 3,000 Serbs in 6 months in the village next to Srebrenica in a period of 6 months. And that's what they never mentioned. So actually, when Serbs came and took Srebrenica over from them, it was a revenge. There was a revenge in it, but it was not in the numbers what they're saying. They shot the army, they separated the kids and the women from the men, but these men were all with weapons before, and it was not just regular men, they were fighting. But there were many killed, yes, but not 7,000, because now they have this huge memorial place, and each and every year all politicians from the world come there and remind the world how Serbs are evil. And they bury everyone they find dead in all Bosnia, they bury them there. So when you come there, you will see 10,000 graves, and you will think, wow, you know, these people were all killed here. What's totally not true. But this guy this Belgian guy in the book did a total research of how many people were living there in that area and area around, and how many are dead, how many left, and he came to much, much, much smaller figure. They just exaggerate with all this stuff, like the Second World War.
Oh, you mean like 6 million?
No comment.
No, I'm just, you know, you got a good point. Those so-called concentration camps that we saw in the news, you know, you spent a guy behind the wire who his rib cage was showing, but, you know, I saw something about that. Those pictures were taken, that guy they weren't in camps, they were actually outside, you know.
Yeah, that was a Dutch journalist.
The Dutch journalist, yeah, exposed that one.
Yeah, a woman.
Yeah,
She told the guy to stand behind the barbed wire, you know. She told him, come stand here, and then they filmed it, you know.
Christine Amanpour was the bitch promoting that war, married James Rubin.
Yeah. Amanpour.
Yeah.
She was always live from the from the battle zone, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's look, I will tell you honest, you know, this was a bloody war. And we in Balkans are used to bloody wars. And this time, in Serbs' eyes, what it was, you know, basically we told to the Muslims, you can stay here, live here, but this will be Serbia. No, they wanted their own country, what Serbs didn't want to give.
Well, they already had Albania, though.
No, I'm talking about Bosnia.
Yeah, I know, but they already had Albania.
Yeah.
Why did they need Serbia? They already had Albania.
Yeah, but the Serbs went into the war with the mentality and the thoughts like, now it's revenge for the 500 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's true, you know, I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
Most Serbs in this war, they were just like, now you're going to pay for these 500 years. Now you will pay the price, motherfuckers. And yeah, and that's still in the people there, you know. That's what I said in the show before, earlier in the show. Many of Serbian nationalists hope for jihad, you know, so they can straighten out.
Rahowa!
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Alex, what the future is. Do you want Serbia to remain separate from, say, Croatia, Bosnia, or do you want to see it like a Yugoslavian country again?
You know, I never want to see it united again. I would love to have a great I know people from all these countries who are good friends of mine, but it's best when we stay among our own borders, you know, and respect each other that way. That's the best. That's the only way to create peace, you know. Serbia and conquered us. Before, Serbia was a proud nation, was a big nation, part of the Byzantine Empire, and we had our own culture, tradition, and that was basically forbidden with the coming of Turks. The religion was forbidden. They were making it very hard to remain Serb and a Christian. So many people converted, but most of Serbs didn't. Maybe some 90% didn't, and we're living basically in hell.
What time frame are we talking about? Is this still 14th century, Alex?
Yeah, 40th century and onward to the 1800s, early 1900s, when we kicked Turks out. So we were living in a struggle. We didn't want to convert. We wanted to remain what we were, and we managed that pretty well. I'm talking to Serbian liberals, and I'm telling them all the time, if our ancestors were thinking like them, we wouldn't exist these days. We would all be Turks. We would all be kind of like Albania now is, or parts of Bosnia. So we are very proud of that we kept our own culture.
1456, there was a strong resistance as well, with Serbia fighting with Macedonians at the time, fighting off the Turks. And then back in 1804 and 1815, there was another situation where the Turks pretty much took control again, right?
Yes, there were many of those kind of resistant fights and trying to free ourselves, but it was basically always crashed. We didn't have much help from the neighboring countries, and Serbs feel betrayed by the neighbors actually because of what was happening. It's a strange story. It's very complicated. I mean, Austrian-Hungarian Empire had one part of Serbia and the other part was under the Turks. So Serbs that were living in Hungarian Empire were basically protecting the borders from the Turks not to invade further into Europe. And they were left alone. They were able to manage culture, tradition, to remain Serbs. But for that, they had to protect the borders, which they did. And yes, we actually always hoped for help. There were always, in some period of this time, because that was 500 years long, there were kings from Austrian-Hungarian Empire and from neighboring countries that were sending some kind of help. But actually, when we needed it the most in Kosovo battle, we didn't get much help at all. There were few countries that sent help, but not like we hoped. And maybe if they did, the Turks wouldn't be able to conquer almost half of Europe.
It seems very important today for NATO, America, the Jews, to basically, I guess, ethnically cleanse a lot of the Slavic people, or if not all, even today in this period, what we're going through today. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's a strange thing. We are small people, Serbs especially, but somehow we were always bullied by these Monsanto donating seeds for farmers so they can start their season again. And our friends are using this situation to get the grip on my country. So that's kind of sad. And
Serbia's got a long history of conflict, especially with the Islamic peoples around the corner, the Turks, the Albanians, some Macedonians, and Croatians also that converted as well. Is that correct?
Well, those Croatians that converted are mostly Bosnian Muslims, Serbs and Croats living in Bosnia. Some percentage of those people converted to Islam a few hundred years ago, and they remain Muslims to this day. So yes, we had the conflicts, and those Macedonians that you mentioned are basically most Albanians, because in Macedonia there is like 50% of Albanians, and it's happening to them just as what was happening to Serbia in Kosovo. Serbia, let's start before we got occupied by Ottoman Turks. In 1389, Serbia had this big battle of Kosovo against the Turks. Maybe it was one Serb on 10 Turks in this battle, and we fought it very hard. Eventually we lost, and Turks suffered tremendous losses themselves. But they didn't conquer us immediately after the battle. It took them some 60 years, because Serbia basically lost all its men. So it was very, very hard to reproduce new people, while Turks just were able to bring a million of other people from everywhere in Asia, and they walked into Serbia. I don't know why. We do not play any significant role in world politics, but many, many things happened in Serbia that affected Europe, like the start of the First World War. And we can go later into that too, but I don't know if Slavs were not treating Jews well. Let's be honest. I mean, we were very rough with them through our history, so it's a kind of revenge of their own. And the worst is they're using white people to accomplish the revenge.
Yeah, Tony Blair happens to be one of them. Supposedly, from what I read, he represents the Albanian government.
He gave Albanians their country. He was one of the perpetrators. He is he works for the Albanian government too as an advisor.
Yes, exactly.
And now he came to Serbia yesterday to help Serbia join the EU. You know, and our president, prime minister, who was a very, very nationalistic guy in the 90s, hardcore Serbian radical. he experienced a very big change. He became this huge liberal today. But the same guy that Serbian prime minister was in the 90s talking how Blair should be arrested and killed and all these politicians. But today he's accepting them as his friends. So it's it's very weird, and Serbs are not happy with that at all. Serbs, for majority Serbs, I think some 65-70% do not want to enter the EU. We fought for hundreds of years for our sovereign country to rule by ourselves.
Alex, welcome to the show today.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome, sir. And Alex, I've been talking with you off and on. You've been calling into a lot of these different alternative radio shows, mostly who have more of like a nationalist mindset or revisionist type of commentary and what their show is based around with revisionism. What shows do you normally call into, Alex, and contribute to for the most part?
Well, mostly the shows that are quite good for Europeans to call in according to the time, because the time difference is very big. And mostly I was calling on Charles Giuliani for some maybe 4 years now. I like to call to the fourth position of Wolf Wall Street, who's got a show on Sunday. Called a few times into Renegade and few other shows, but it's basically those shows that I call in.
Okay, great. And you did a show not too long ago with Wolf Wall Street, Fourth Position Radio, regarding the Serbian floods. Is that correct?
Yes, that was some few weeks ago.
Okay. Can you update us on what you know about Serbia right now with the floods and what's going on there?
Well, it's the life is back to normal. But in some places they're still rebuilding it. A lot of houses were destroyed by landslides, by high water. It's life is kind of back to normal, but we have these jackals now, these hyenas from the central banks that are coming to help us. We had